The Restless Dead by Simon Beckett. Read by Jonathan Keeble. Chapter 1. Composed of over 60% water, a human body isn't naturally buoyant. It will float only for as long as there is air in its lungs, before gradually sinking to the bottom. If the water is very cold or deep, it will remain there, undergoing a slow, dark dissolution that can take years. But if the water is warm enough for bacteria to feed and multiply, then it will continue to decompose. Gases will build up in the intestines, increasing the body's buoyancy until it floats again. And the dead will literally rise. Suspended face down, limbs trailing below, the body will drift on or just under the water's surface. Over time, in a morbid reversal of its formation in the womb's amniotic darkness, it will eventually come apart. The extremities first, fingers, hands, and feet. Then arms and legs, and finally the head, all falling away until only the torso is left. When the last of the decompositional gases have seeped out, the torso, too, will slowly sink a second and final time. But water can also cause another transformation to take place. As the soft tissues decompose, the layer of subcutaneous fat begins to break down, encasing a once living human body in a thick, greasy layer. Known as adipocere, or grave wax, to give it its more colourful title, this pallid substance also goes by a less macabre name: soap. Cocooned in its dirty white shroud, the internal organs are preserved as the body floats on its last solitary journey, unless chance brings it once more into the light of day. The skull was a young female's, the gender hinted at by its more gracile structure. The frontal bone was high and smooth, lacking any bulge of eyebrow ridges, while the small bump of the mastoid process beneath the opening of the ear looked too delicate for a male. Not that such things were definitive, but taken together they left me in little doubt. The adult teeth had all broken through by the time of death, which indicated she was older than 12, though not by much. Although 2 molars and an upper incisor were missing, probably dislodged post-mortem, the remaining teeth were hardly worn. It confirmed the story told by the rest of her skeleton, that she died before reaching her late teens. The cause of death was all too obvious. At the back of the skull, a jagged hole about 1 inch long and half that wide sat almost dead centre of the occipital bone. There was no sign of healing, and the edges of the wound were splintered, suggesting the bone was living when the injury occurred. That wouldn't have been the case if the damage had been inflicted after death, when the bone dries out and becomes brittle. The first time I'd picked up the skull, I'd been surprised to hear an almost musical rattle from inside. At first I'd thought it must be bone fragments, forced into the brain cavity by whatever object had killed the young victim. But it sounded too large and solid for that. The X-ray confirmed what I guessed. Loose inside the girl's skull was a slender, symmetrical shape. An arrowhead. It was impossible to say exactly how old the skull was, or how long it had lain in the ground on the windswept Northumberland moors. All that could be said with any certainty was that she'd been dead over 500 years, long enough for the arrow shaft to disintegrate and the bone to darken to a caramel colour. Nothing would ever be known about her, not who she was, nor why she'd died. I liked to think whoever had killed her, as she was either turned or running away, had received some sort of punishment for the crime. But there was no way of knowing that either. The arrowhead shifted with a soft percussive noise as I packed away the skull, carefully wrapping it in tissue paper before replacing it in its box. Like the other historical skeletons in the university's anthropology department, it was used to train undergraduates, a morbid curio sufficiently ancient as to be largely devoid of shock. I was used to it. God knows I'd seen worse, but that particular memento mori always struck me as particularly poignant. Perhaps it was because of the victim's youth, or the brutal manner of her death. Whoever she was, she'd once been someone's daughter. Now, centuries later, all that remained of the nameless girl
Sample complete. Ready to continue?